Paul Wilson, perhaps I could start with you. We have heard from our tour of the country, talking to small businesses, that there's a real cost crisis confronting a lot of small businesses in our country. Do you think that's true?
I do. Cost pressures are severe at the moment. We at the Federation of Small Businesses have a quarterly confidence survey, the Small Business Index, and confidence is currently at minus 40.7%, which basically means 40% more businesses think it's getting worse than getting better at the moment, and cost pressures are a key driver for that. So over 80% of small firms report rising costs. 23% of them have seen their costs rise by over 10% in the last year. 35% have seen their costs rise between 6 and 10%. And if I was to go back right over the 15 years we've been asking these questions, that is a lot more than we normally see.
Are these the worst figures ever, or is it not that bad?
I couldn't say that for sure. Things got pretty intense during the energy price crisis, and I haven't done the comparison, but it feels, I guess since then, none of the cost pressures have really let up. Particularly like energy, it's not as high as it was, but it's still a really significant pressure. You've also got labour costs, and if you're an employer, that is your biggest cost pressure at the moment. And then tax has risen substantially as a driver of cost increases, and it's being cited as a pressure by 47% of our small firms. So yes, cost pressures are severe. We are optimistic about the potential for the strategy to help with small business confidence, and keen to talk about some of those better things later on.
We will certainly get into that. Which are the cost pressures which are causing the most problems in your view?
If you're an employer, it's labour costs at the moment, undoubtedly. Like if you're a small or medium employer, by which I mean 10 or more employees, that is being currently reported as your biggest barrier to growth of all at the moment, which I have not seen before.
Okay. Johnny, what's the perspective from the chambers?
Yeah, so pretty much very similar. So kind of as expected, since COVID saw the numbers go down a bit, and then they kind of continued to go down, peaked up a bit again in 2022, start of 2023, and then over the last year or so have gone down again. So we've been running our quarterly economic survey for the last 30 years, and we've seen the lowest numbers over the last year. It's ticked up again recently, so I think to follow the previous point.
Just unpack that a bit for us. Lowest numbers, what do you mean?
So in terms of business sentiment survey that runs across the in our quarterly economic survey, it's been asking the same question every quarter for the last 30 years. Yeah. And at that point it was at its lowest, which...
As in worst?
Worst, yes, in a literal sense, which not entirely surprised about, but in the positivity, it's picked up a lot. In terms of the cost pressures, to kind of similar point, recently asked our members, 73% cited labour costs, 53% cited utilities, and out of all of that, hospitality firms, probably unsurprisingly, were the ones who are most likely to report cost pressures.
Yeah. And do you get a sense of what's going on with those labour costs? Is it just the demand for higher wages, or is it NICs, or is it what?
So it's a mixture. The NICs undoubtedly had a massive impact. Talk to members, that is the number one thing that comes across on that one over the last 6 months.
Dominic, thank you very much indeed for joining us at what was quite short notice. We're really grateful to have you with us. From the community's point of view, what are some of the pressures that you pick up from your members?
So we find, sort of echoing the 2 points that I said before, there's huge amounts of pressures around energy prices at the moment. We see that not only for small businesses but across the wider economy as well. Comparable to European nations, we pay a lot more. We welcome the improvement of the supercharge scheme that was announced through the industrial strategy recently, but there's still a lot of work to do to diversify our energy portfolio in order to ensure that we can bring those energy prices down and pass those benefits on to members and workers within the small business sector. We'd also say that there is an issue as well in terms of the pressures around Brexit as well. So in terms of the cost of bureaucratic processes to sell to the European Union, obviously that remains the UK's largest market, so the ability for small businesses, light industries, etc., to sell into the continental market has become a lot harder, and there's been an increase in bureaucratic costs in order to achieve that. So the UK government's efforts to reset the relationship is very welcome, and we'd like a continuation of the process there to sort of relieve those cost pressures through the bureaucratic process to sell into the European market.
Get a sense of the hierarchy of cost pressures?
We wouldn't be able to speak as strongly to that, but I would definitely say from what we hear from our members across every single sector is that energy prices is one of the biggest pressures on businesses at the moment, both in terms of large-scale industries such as the steel sector all the way down to lighter industries and smaller businesses, and also in terms of members as well. We'll touch upon this, I'm sure, later on in this session, but in terms of the buying power of people within the economy to buy from small businesses, to buy from these kind of companies, their ability to do that is restricted more due to the high utility costs and the high energy prices. So you've got the pressures on the business in terms of them actually paying the costs themselves, but also the pressure that comes in from their consumer base as well, not being able to easily purchase from them because they've got their own high utility costs as well, both in terms of individual consumers, but also in terms of other businesses buying a business-to-business.
Okay, so we've got some cost push going on in the supply chains.
Yes, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, Andrew, you're from the British Independent Retailers Association. What are your members telling you about costs?
I would say it is the highest cost base, and also that translates into retailers probably working on the lowest profit margins they've ever worked on in their memory. You know, we represent independent retailers, small pet shop, independent department store across the UK, and the costs of energy, it's not so big for us, because some retailers use more energy than others depending what's in their premises. If you've got a cafe, you're probably going to use up more energy than a clothes shop. But I would say that their biggest concern's always been around business rates. That went up 140% in April for businesses who lost the benefit of the previous retail hospitality leisure relief. And that will also, for some businesses next year, with the current proposal, and we're talking about business rates later, but for a medium-sized business that employs more than 10 people, above £51,000 rateable value, that will increase by more than 300% over 2 years.
Increase by
330% over 2 years. From 24 to 26, that will have increased based on the current proposals.
Yeah.
So that kind of shift, and these are property businesses, so you can't avoid business rates. Most of them are above £15,000. They don't qualify for small business rates relief. They will employ people, so your labour costs kick in. And this year, NIC, it's not so much an increase in natural NIC contribution, but it's a reduction of the threshold at which it's payable. The £5,000 threshold means that part-timers suddenly became a real issue. And in the independent market, you would employ part-timers more likely. Local people not wanting to travel into work, not wanting full-time work, but wanting to work part-time in a local shop. They suddenly qualify for national insurance payments by the employer because of that £5,000 threshold. You only need 8 hours a week.
When we listen to the evidence across this panel, it sounds like everything.
It's hard. Part of it is external factors. Energy went up because Russia invaded Ukraine.
Yeah, coffee prices have gone up.
Coffee prices have gone up, and the supply chain comes in, and unfortunately, probably for lots of businesses, when you're buying in stock for resale, the producers of that stock have seen the same increases that businesses have seen, that my members have seen, probably more so because they're producers with higher energy costs, and they just pass it straight down the chain.
But the net result is your judgment that your members are operating on the tightest margins in living memory.
Because they're not able now to pass it on, consumer spending confidence is low, consumer spending is fragile. An independent retailer already doesn't compete on price. We're not competing with Tesco's, Aldi and the likes, or Primark in the fashion world and so on. They do a great job at what they're doing. So you're competing on service, you're competing on locality, you're competing on community loyalty, which is great, but there's only so much people can afford.
We heard businesses tell us, look, I just can't charge £5 for a flat white, I just can't charge £10 for a pint. I'm at the limits now of what I can charge.
It doesn't matter what product you choose, hospitality, retail, people know what the known value is for that item. It used to be a pint of milk, you wouldn't pay more than £2 for 4 pints of milk, and probably still wouldn't. You don't like paying more than £7 a pint. You don't like paying more than £150 for a suit. It is really hard to get people to go above what they believe that they should be paying or can afford.
So we've hit the maximum pain point for consumers now, and therefore margins just take the...
They have to